Welcome to an emergency episode of Is It Bad for the Economy? I'm Democratic Strategist Kobi Tirey. Keeping me honest is the anonymous financial practitioner, Banker Bill. This morning, Kevin Warsh received probably some of the best news of his life. He was nominated to be the next Fed chair to succeed Jerome Powell, if confirmed. Less than 12 hours later, his name was popping up in the Epstein files. It's been an absolute roller coaster. And so we just want to do a quick review of the Fed chair race and what we think of Warsh moving forward. Banker Bill, let's put everything that's happened in the last 24 hours aside for a second. Could you remind us, please, what the general consensus was on Warsh as the next Fed chair?
He was of the top three that have always been in the running of Waller, Warsh, Hassett, the midpoint of the three in terms of policy outcomes and I would suppose the market perception. A little more detail on him. He wants total policy overall from the operating and administration standpoint of the Federal Reserve. He wants to substantially change some of the work that they do, how they conduct analysis, et cetera. He wants closer Fed Treasury alignment like there was prior to I don't know, the early 50s, right? That Mariner Eccles era was like the transitionary period. Before that, the Treasury and the Fed were actually much more closer than they are today.
And sorry, that means that the president would exert more control over the Fed just by nature of the fact that they'd be more tucked into the administration, right?
Yeah, I mean, to an extent, and the Fed would not play foil to economic goals that the administration may have had at the time, right? And that we're not going down. That's not the purpose of this episode. More on back to Warsh, where we were coming from with this. I remember for much of his career, he's been laser focused on inflation. He's like classic. He was in George W. Bush's National Economic Council. So, if George Bush or Paul Ryan or John Boehner were running for president, or they were president, this would be like their choice to pick. So kind of like an establishment Republican candidate of the late 90s, early 2000s ilk, was always very concerned that when he was at the Federal Reserve as governor, that inflation would come from the 2008 stimulus from the financial crisis. That inflation never materialized. He's been an inflation hawk the whole time. And basically with a criticism that folks have in mind too, is he's kind of like flip-flopped. And basically around the election of the 2024 election, he started singing a little bit of a different tune and not being so interested in pushing his hawkish inflation narrative. Now he has backup for that. He comes in with kind of the look of AI is going to destabilize the job market, and it's actually going to create outright deflation. And because we're going to get this rampant deflation, we need to be cutting rates and leveraging the Fed's balance sheet in pursuance of what's to come, right? So that's like his new slant. And, most recently, he's made several statements that we're on the verge of this structural decline because of the advancements in AI. Not so much of a different view from Nick, but arriving near the same place in how they see AI transforming the economy.
And Nick is a reference to Nick Giametti, who's going to be our guest on the next episode of Is It Bad for the Economy? It's an awesome episode about AI. He's a VC and an old friend of mine. So it's basically him telling me in really big words to stop being a hater when it comes to AI. But obviously, we just had to cover these Fed developments.
One more thing on Warsh. Remember, he was a dark horse candidate in 2017, right? Before how we got Powell in the first place. And I think it might have been over the summer. Trump actually made a comment he should have picked Warsh over Powell. So it's not necessarily a surprise.
The way we'd been talking about it, and I think we just got really, really cynical about it. We'd basically been saying Hassett is absolutely not acceptable. Warsh, you might as well accept him because anything that can stop Trump from nominating Hassett's going to be seen as a good thing. I was expecting Warsh to receive a much warmer reception today. Folks, even on the center right, were coming after this guy for being too close to Trump world. Has your thinking on that changed at all? Were we just so happy not to have Hassett that we maybe underplayed Warsh's weaknesses?
No, I mean, and Warsh, the weaknesses that he has, you can actually bear them out in kind of like the normal process. From my perspective, Hassett, I think, was a non-starter, ridiculous, with Warsh. You got policy disagreements with him. These questions about him flip flopping. The Senate Banking Committee can ask him questions about all this, and if they're not satisfied with the answers, don't pick the guy. They have time.
Well, we're definitely going to get into the Senate, but first, the big question: how did the markets respond to this?
I think it was pretty muted, wasn't it? I mean, I was obviously I'm working on a Friday afternoon or a Friday during the day. It's very busy here at month end. I think that ultimately the equity markets I think finished flat. I think maybe the interest rates, the 10-year yield or the 2-year yield might have initially spiked, but then by the end of the day, we're maybe flat to down. I don't think there was a material change.
Well, all eyes are on the Senate right now, not just because of the shutdown, but also because of this Fed fight. Senator Tillis, who's on the banking committee, made it extremely clear when Powell announced that he'd been targeted by the DOJ that he would not appoint any Fed chair successor before that investigation was dropped by the DOJ. Similarly, he also said he wasn't going to consider any governor nominees until the Lisa Cook issue had been resolved by the Supreme Court. We were very pleasant to hear that this morning that Tillis is standing firm on that. I was actually a little surprised.
Good for him. It seems like he doesn't give a shit. He before our episode here, I wanted to see exactly what he said, or hear what he said. So I popped on the interview he did this morning with Bloomberg, and the key phrase he said to me was that the Senate has to stand in the breach. So okay, the Senate's pulling back. They're clawing. He's saying, hey, I'm going to claw back at least with every power I can, my legislative being, and stick in there that the regulation of the Federal Reserve is through Congress, through me, and that these lawfare litigious attacks on the Federal Reserve to try to strike out its independence are ridiculous. And until they're settled, those matters are settled law. I'm not doing anything. I'm not budging. And that was the message he sent. He sent that, I think that interview, Kobe, was this morning, maybe at like 8:30, 8:45. So he was out early.
Yeah, he's clearly not pulling any punches. I'm not going to say that it's the most effective piece of political fighting I've ever seen, but he posted this really strong post on X a few hours ago, all about what it means to be a sycophant. So I think that tells you right there that he no longer wants to be one. He's not going to go down as a Trump bootlegger, and we appreciate that from him. On the Democratic side,
have you noticed?
yeah,
Have you noticed Tillis is always working in that he only has like 300 and some days left
I'll
as a
take it.
senator?
I'll take it. I'll take it.
On the Democrat side, go ahead.
Yeah, on the Democrat side, Schumer pulled a little bit of a head scratcher yesterday when he announced that they'd come to a deal with the White House to keep the government open. Lindsey Graham threw a wrench in that for the last 24 hours just because he wanted to still be able to sue the DOJ for having, getting a wiretap on him, something that was really, really, really unpopular after the big beautiful bill passed. That seems to be resolved. The government will shut down tonight at midnight, tonight being Friday, January 30th. It's expected that the House will come back on Monday and open it right back up. But with how things are going right now, you just never know. Allegedly, that's going to buy the Senate 2 weeks to come up with a bill that puts some guardrails on ICE. I want to believe that something is going to come of that. That is technically probably the most constructive way forward, the way to get something concrete on the books, because cutting off ICE's funding was not really possible in this round of budget talks, in this round of shutdown talks. But this broke just as we were recording yesterday for our episode that's coming out on Wednesday, and you made, I think, the pretty obvious inference that Chuck Schumer had made some sort of deal to get a Fed chair nominee other than Hassett. I don't want to believe that's the case. After Trump basically announced that Hassett was out of the running after that Powell attack, after Diamond and Wall Street came after him for it, Warsh was expected to be the nominee. Kalshi said as much. And at the same time, with Schumer throwing the shutdown deal into a complete chaos last night, I'm not even sure who wants the government to be shut down right now. Do you still think that there was a deal made there, or have you kind of softened off of that position a little bit in the last 24 hours?
Who knows? There could be a deal. Why not? There's many options. Another option I was dreaming up is the president is the ultimate controller of the news flow. and he said that he was going to be announcing his pick next week. Well, he just pulled it forward to this morning. Why? What does he have something else that he has for next week, or maybe he's swapping one thing for another? He's been having a lot of reporting about the immigration stuff and people being killed in the streets, and then you have Tom Homan coming in saying, we're gonna draw down people, we're gonna pull it off. So to take that off the burner, to bring that off, we put our Fed chair candidate out. But I don't even know if that one works, because then you put your Fed chair candidate out, and through that candidate, you reintroduce another scandal you've been dealing with through the Epstein files, which what? Kevin Warsh is implicated in the Epstein files?
We got just two really quick things to get through before we get to the Epstein files. But yeah, I think the obvious answer is that there was no deal with Schumer, or maybe another obvious answer would be not that there was a deal with Schumer, but that Trump was throwing the kitchen sink everything he's got at this news cycle to distract from this latest Epstein file dump.
I just don't know that Kevin Warsh would be who you'd make a deal for.
Right.
Like
that's what I was saying.
No
he was a lot.
Respect to Mr. Warsh, Governor Warsh, excuse me.
Yeah, so a lot of mud is getting flung today. The two really quick ones I wanted to get through. The first, again, from Tim Miller, from the Billwork, somebody that just based on his economic policies, being a free market guy who left the Republican Party over Trump, I would have expected him to be a bigger fan of Warsh. I don't know. Maybe Tim Miller's had a position on Warsh for a long time. I don't follow him that closely, but he said Kevin Warsh's father-in-law, Ron Lander, the billionaire behind the Greenland plot, who is also doing a lithium deal with the U.S. government-backed partner in Ukraine, Epstein claimed they were friends in emails concerning conflict of interest for the independent Fed chair. Sorry, that was in the Epstein files too. It just wasn't the big Epstein files thing. Are you concerned by Warsh's connections?
Yeah, I think Warsh and Lauder had like a New York Times announcement of their wedding in like 2002. So when Warsh was at the Federal Reserve in 2006 to 11, that was known. The new conflicts and connections to Trump or Greenland, no, I was not previously aware. But the fact that he is not the rich person in his relationship, even though he's the one that worked at Morgan Stanley, yes, well known.
I was going to bring up his wife next. Some folks were saying, look, the Estee Lauder stock is already rising on the news that Warsh has been nominated for the Fed chair position. I looked up the numbers from closing, from opening to just after close. It looks like it raised by like 60 cents, so 0.5%. That's not real, is it?
No, that's why, like, the early morning market reaction, ignore it. That's all just stuff to get you to listen, right? It's just media to get you to listen. Right. You gotta 90% of it's garbage, right?
Lastly, we do just have to get to the Epstein files real quick. We've been laughing a bit this episode. The Epstein news today has been absolutely devastating. This has been one of the hardest days of following the news that I've experienced in my lifetime. And so I don't want to be too flippant as we get to this part. But there are some emails in the latest Epstein file drop that seem to indicate that Kevin Warsh was on a list of folks who was staying near Epstein's Island, who would be celebrating Christmas on Epstein's Island in 2010. And next to Kevin Warsh's name is a redacted name. That doesn't necessarily mean that person was a victim, but it very well could. I don't know how to respond to this news. I guess the only question I have to ask you, Banker Bill, do you think this changes anything from the standpoint of how the financial world is going to receive this guy? We'll see what happens in popular opinion. We'll see what happens in the lead up to the Senate Banking Committee hearing. But do you think that Diamond and the finance world is going to have a reaction to this like they did when Powell and Cook were attacked?
I'm not sure. That's a great question. However, if I were a senator, it's the only thing I'm asking. It's the first thing I'm asking about when I meet him in the offices, to explain it. Give me all. I want to know all the details, the extent of the time you left your house to the time you actually returned home. There's really nothing else to consider if you won't tell me what happened. It's as it is. The mere implication, in my opinion, he is already borderline disqualified. And
Yeah.
if you yesterday, if you would have said Warsh is the nominee, okay, fine. Like we're gonna live through it. Not this. He gets put on there. They want to change the supervisory mandate, have a closer thing. Fed Treasury balance, monetize the balance sheet, move the balance sheet this way, one way to help housing or to help this group. That go ahead, we'll figure all that out. But now we're bringing this back up. Now you're telling me we're gonna nominate and confirm a man to the Federal Reserve chairmanship who's implicated in something that's cost ministers in other countries their job and resulted in the loss of title for the Prince of England. I'm sorry, automatic disqualifier. And if you can't explain exactly what happened, and then ultimately he should have to explain it word for word, and word for word how what happened, what was the extent of that trip, why his name is in a document openly in a Senate Banking Committee hearing. I mean, we can't talk about anything else. We can't talk about his views on monetary policy or if he thinks rates are too high. If you're telling me he was in the same room potentially with drugs, contraband, whatever, with underage people who were maybe or maybe not trafficked there. No, there's nothing else to discuss. I'm sorry. I don't care who your wife is. I don't care who your father-in-law is. I don't care that you were at Morgan Stanley. Don't care that Ben Bernanke has nice things to say about you.
Well, I am obviously happy to hear you say that. I would expect for you to say that. I hope we're going to be hearing a lot more of that from the banking and finance world. I know we're going to be hearing it from the Democrats, but unfortunately, they don't have the standing they need to win a Fed chair fight all on their own. But hopefully, we can all come together, get this done, and find not only a better candidate, but a candidate who just doesn't have this terrible, terrible garbage, this terrible baggage related to him. Really quickly, we have to say as well, we have not been a big fan of him on this podcast, but it's also, just very sad to see that Lutnick is involved in all of this. Howard Lutnick, who is the engineer behind Trump's trade policy, it looks like that he was hanging out with Epstein, much friendlier with Epstein, much later than he had admitted to previously.
And
Um,
he's one of these guys that said he was disgusting. I knew he was a slime ball. I wanted nothing to do with him. And now it's coming out that he's what, but potentially was bringing his family down there several years after what is going on?
yeah, and it's important to
I
say.
mean, bring them all in. The docs are released. Everybody come in. Tell us what you were doing there. And you won't talk. You're not going to talk about what you saw, what you did. Okay.
Yeah.
Take the fifth then. Sit there for 2.5 hours and take the fifth. Go ahead.
No, yeah, I think there's really not much more to say on that. If you are looking for some interesting, funny, and slightly terrifying news to look at this evening that is not about Trump or Epstein, check out the Claudebot social media platform where some AIs were plotting against humans. It looks like some folks are now wondering if that was a little bit more of a marketing stunt. I really wish we'd found out about it before we had our excellent recording session yesterday with, as I said, Silicon Valley VC Nick Giametti, a dear, dear old friend of mine. Again, it's a really great conversation we had about AI, the future of employment, and why I need to stop hating on Silicon Valley so much. We're really happy to share that with you on Wednesday, but for right now, we'll just have to keep tracking the story as it develops, and we have to hope that there is some sort of positive resolution of this Warsh nomination. And I know the Epstein file story is going to get worse, but it's brutal.